All right, guys, welcome to a special edition of the Social Dig. We have some breaking news here. Kind of wanted to go over the 2023 NDAA. And for that, I'm going to bring in my guy, Mateo, and we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the changes and some of the things that we may have issues with in this NDAA. How you doing, Mateo?
I'm doing well, Rob. Good to see you. Glad to be part of this. Thanks for getting things together quickly here because this is kind of still breaking news, and I think your viewers want to hear the details. Everyone wants to hear the details, and we've worked hard and we've done just that. So this ought to be good, and we should we'll now know what 2023 holds in store for us.
Definitely, definitely. So what I can do you have the document? We can go ahead and load it up.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start off with the initial document as shown on the congress.gov. So if you want to bring that up, we can talk to that here. This is the website that I've been going to since July and June and July when all of this started. And really was the last time we all talked about this was in July when the original NDAA was drafted and passed and talked about, and that actually corresponds to this legislation here, HR, which stands for House of Representatives 7900. This was the original bill that was passed by the House, as you can see here, but it never went to the Senate. And then in parallel with this, the Senate produced this document or this bill called the Intelligence Authorization Act, which was also in July. And this one never got passed by anybody, but this was the one with all the whistleblower verbiage that everyone got excited about in July. So since then, not a whole lot has happened. But unbeknownst to me and to the rest of us, both of these documents were combined in June as well in July into this HR 7776 James M. Inhofe National NDAA for 2023. And this was the representative who actually drafted it or started it off. So I guess it got named after him. So as you can see down here in the timing, all of this went down in the June and then in late July, and a whole bunch of stuff happened in late July. The last thing was the Senate passed it on to the House with amendments, and then the House, because originally the House passed it in June, but then the House had to repass it last week because of the amendments, and they also finished all the text, and now it's pretty much a done deal. So as you can see up here, or you can see down here, it passed on Thursday. And so as you can see in this little progress bar they got up here, which I like, you can see it's passed all three of these things. So now it's on to the president.
Great.
So, and it makes sense, right? Because we have to pass the defense budget in the previous year. Otherwise, come January 1st, our military is not funded. And none of us want that. So I had heard from somebody that and the NDAAs for the past 60 years have always passed in December before New Year's because it would be silly not to do that.
Definitely.
And so in any event, that's what was online that everybody in the whole world can get at these addresses. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Let's talk about this for a minute, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was there anything that you noticed as far as any changes go?
Oh yeah, there's a few. And last week you and I spoke about this, and others, and some those in your audience probably heard there was a new the revised verbiage for the UAP stuff added some things and took away some things and changed some timing, changed some name definitions, a lot of different things. So uh, we'll talk about it, and then we'll kind of come to our conclusion as to whether or not it's a walking back or an enhancement or kind of the same old story. But
Yeah, I would love to find that out because I just have a feeling they're going to walk something back, but I don't know. Here, let's see.
yeah,
Do you have something else here?
yeah, I'm going to share the actual document, which is quite huge, and I'll bring it up here, and hopefully you can kick it in right here.
Yep, there we go.
Very good. So this is the actual document, and as you can see, it's a PDF, and you can download it from that website that I showed you earlier. But this is the actual document in all of its splendor, and as you can see at the top here, it's 4,312 pages.
Jeez.
So this is the whole banana with all of the UAP verbiage um, entered into it. And we're obviously not going to go through all that. We're going to jump to the pages that matter. But this is how it is. And they talk in the beginning here about the different sections and changes. One of the noteworthy things in the sections here that I think is interesting is Part A, or Division A, is the Department of Defense authorization. So this is actually the important stuff. And there's some UAP stuff in there. And then you'll notice down here, the Intelligence Authorization Act was kind of made part of this, as I alluded to earlier. So it's all one big giant document now, and it's all passed. And there's other stuff in here, Homeland Security and the funding table. If you want to see some big dollar figures in the hundreds of billions, go to this table. It's unbelievable.
Yikes.
You can only imagine, right? So anyhow, without further ado, let's jump straight to the pages that are of interest. There are basically 3 sections and that talk about UAP. And I actually did a search of the document for the keywords to see if there were any other hiding. And this matches some of the early release documentation that came out late last week and over the weekend. So in the first section, obviously very important here, the first thing that sticks out is the name. Unidentified anomalous phenomenon. What was it called before? Unidentified aerial phenomenon. So they've changed the name of the office and of the whole definition of what a UAP is in this document. Now, it's actually good news. And later on, we're going to talk about that because there is a section where they define the word anomalous. And so we're definitely going to talk about that more. So, I think they're trying to cast a little bit of a wider net here. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I mean, I don't see anything negative about that. That pretty much encompasses more of actually what's going on, I would think.
Indeed. So without getting into a lot of detail, just some overview here. I've got about maybe 10 points on this section. We'll go through. Probably the first one is to just see who's responsible. So it's going to be the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence who have to basically make this office. And the office gets named later, but I'll spoiler. I'll just say it's going to be called Arrow. So that was walked back from the anomalous aerospace reconnaissance office. They walked that back from the other definition they were playing with in July, which was the joint or the unidentified aerospace undersea phenomenon joint program office. That's gone. So we're back to the easy to pronounce Arrow again.
Good.
So here, one point on this here, and I want to hear your thoughts. This is kind of like putting the kids in charge of the candy store, right? So this office is really going to be run by the 2 groups that are withholding information from us right now, right? The DNI is responsible for the UAP report, and they haven't delivered. And we all know about the DOD and what their willingness is to share stuff. So these are the 2 agencies or the 2 groups within the government that are responsible for this office. And that worries me a little bit, but I don't know. What do you think? It's not
Of course,
independent.
red flags, definitely. I mean, just like say, if you can have a law where they're just blatantly going to disregard it, then I don't really have too much hope for these two departments being in charge of this. That's for sure.
Indeed. So anyhow, we'll see what happens. But in any event, glossing through some of this stuff, this page, there's in this first section, there are, let's see, there's 9 pages in this first section. And this page, we won't go into the details, but it's talking about um, what the office will cover and things of that sort. Nothing new here. I mean, obviously, it's got to be unidentified aerial phenomenon or anomalous phenomenon. The next noteworthy thing that I want to talk about is on the next page, down here, line 18. It talks about, in this previous section, they talk a little bit about disclosure events, like disclosure from people within the organization who may have something to say. And it says down here, not later than 72 hours after determining an authorized disclosure relates to restricted access activities, special access programs, compartmental access programs. It's basically saying that the office has to report their discovery of any sort of disclosure of information that comes from anything within the government or outside the government that pertains to this. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it seems, and of course, it's going to go to the Congressional Defense Committee and the Congressional Intelligence Community, which means, unfortunately, not to us. It's going to go to these. Obviously, these two committees are made up of people with clearances, so it's going to be behind the closed doors. But it looks like Congress is going to get word on anything that the office finds that's pertaining to disclosure or meaningful toward that pretty quick, within 3 days. What are your thoughts?
I'm just hung up on them using the term disclosure. I mean, obviously they may mean that in a different way, but it's promising, sort of.
Yep. They talk about it here. It's really not referred to as disclosure of the whole phenomenon. It's really disclosure of information
Yeah,
that
yeah,
comes available to the office. So yeah, they kind of mixed terms here. At first, I was excited too, and I thought, no, this isn't what we think
yeah.
it is.
No, not at all.
So, moving on page 1400, we've got another time frame that I like to point out, and I'll say this now, but as compared to what was going on this year from the NDAA 2022 and all the deadlines, we were had the hearing in May, and there was supposed to be another report on Halloween. None of that has happened. Well, now they're getting a pass again. So, and there's a few dates in here. This one's probably the least exciting, but it matches a few of the others. So, not later than 180 days after the enactment of this act, the secretary acting through the head of the office in consultation with the director of national intelligence shall, and then basically they have to submit to the Congress defense committees and intelligence committees a report detailing the mechanism for authorized reporting. And that's kind of what this all goes into. So they've got 6 months after this act has been passed, which will happen when the president signs it. They've got 6 months to just set up the whole reporting scheme, right?
Again,
So,
again.
so what if uh, another Navy pilot or someone in private industry wants to say something during the first 6 months of 2023? The whole reporting procedure isn't even there yet. And so they've got a pass here it's like they're basically, kicking the can down the road, as the saying goes.
Exactly. Kicking
And
the can down the road. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yep.
It
So
says
that's a
we,
little
we
disappointing. I thought they would have to have this like right away, because what if people on January 1st want to whistleblow, right? They can't.
well,
There's no means by which to do it.
the way I feel is that it's really, this is just the big distraction. I mean, they do this every year, and if they do this every year, the next thing you know, 5 years has passed, 10 years has passed, and they're still doing the same thing. So it's keep your eye on the bouncing ball sort of thing. And
Oh
I
yeah,
think
you're
that
going to
that
see that more of that later too in here. You're
definitely.
absolutely right. And I don't know. I hate to be skeptical. I want to, you and I have talked about this before on your show. We're pro government, we're pro military. We love our country. We want to believe that they're have our best interest at heart. But there's no doubt here that they're giving these guys a pass. So if they can delay again, and who knows what's going to happen, right? Laws are only as good as their enforcement. So anyhow, um, on to the next item. Down here, there is some discussion about um, who let me make sure I got this right. Who the disclosure is, line 20 to 22. Yes. So it talks about what an authorized disclosure is. So here we get a little bit more of a talk about what's going on. So basically, think of disclosure as information, right? It's information that may be coming from someone in government or someone in private industry. And it actually goes back to the non-disclosure agreements. So an authorized disclosure shall not be subject to a non-disclosure agreement entered into by the individual who makes the disclosure. So this I felt was noteworthy, because this is part of the initial whistleblower protection thing, right? So they've kind of taken all that information and stuck it in different places. But this is the important one, where it basically says you you can disclose anything you want and forget about your NDAA, or your NDA, excuse me. And that obviously is important. So that opens the door for the individuals. And you can see the title of this section: Protection for Individuals Making Authorized Disclosure, right? So that's part of the real meat in here that we all had heard about. Obviously, it made it in. It's here, and we can move forward. So, what are your thoughts?
This is what I've been waiting to take a look at here. I'm just so glad that we'll have something that'll protect the whistleblowers. I mean, as far as the information they may be able to provide, because still it's going to be within Congress, so it won't be public information. But at least they'll be able to have an outlet to
Yes.
get some of this off the chest.
And you bring up a good point, and we're doing this quickly because we want to get the information out there. But I read through all of these pages, and there is no obligation anywhere that I could find for any sort of public um, disclosure of any of these findings. It's all going to obviously the Congressional Defense Committee and the Congressional Committee for Intelligence. Those are all behind closed doors. So that's a little disappointing. So yes, the whistleblowers will be able to tell Congress. What happens after that, we don't know. So along the lines of the protection, there's another big section here on this page that talks about, who who's there prohibition on reprisals, which basically means it's going to be illegal to punish people who are in this category. So we've got a lot of groups here, right? Employee of Department of or agency of federal government, a contractor, subcontractor, grantee, subgrantee, personal services contractor, all this sort of stuff. So they are all basically um, they will not be able to have any action taken against them, or threat to take any action against them, or threat to terminate employment or anything like that. So this is really the protection that the whistleblowers are going to be able to enjoy. We already, was mentioned earlier, but now the only thing I saw in here that's good is it covers all of the private industry, black budget businesses out there, like the Lockheed Martins and the Raytheons and the Grummans and all of the other, and Boeings, where there might be work going on, right? And who's to say? Obviously, they've locked it away, and you can't get at it via a FOIA. But now a contractor can come in and talk to Congress. So we all knew this was coming, but here's the verbiage that backs it up.
So as far as that goes, so is this like a two-way situation where these contractors, subcontractors, obviously, if they feel they want to speak to Congress and release some information, does it go both ways to where they can also be subpoenaed potentially to be brought in to give the information, or is it something they willingly are going to have to come in and do?
It's a very good question. And based on what I've read in here, no, it's a push as opposed to a pull. So the people have to come forward. It's not that Congress can go after somebody. I mean, Congress can probably subpoena anybody, but we all know that. But I don't know if this bill gives them the ability to do that. It's a good question. Now you have me wondering if they would be willing to go that far. Clearly, they want people to come forward, and maybe that's the way they're going to leave it.
Because I'm just trying to think of what would be the motivation for someone subcontracting or contractor to risk losing employment to come and say. So yeah, I mean,
it's a tough call. I mean, unless they're a real patriot and they feel like they're willing to sacrifice their job, it's highly unlikely that they're going to want to come forward voluntarily. I wonder about that myself, because government is one thing. And if you're in a government employee or military, there's obviously strong patriotism and civil duty there that keeps people's mouths shut. Contractors are made up of the same people. They just are civilians, right? They may be equally as patriotic. They may not want to say anything. And so, this opens the door.
So it's a whistleblower option if you choose to blow the whistle.
Correct.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's keep rolling. All right. So the next page I wanted to look at was in here, or one more page after this for this section. I thought this was interesting, but in here, see if I got this right, 1402, line 6 through 21. This is talking about how all of these departments, the Secretary of Defense, the DNI, this Homeland Security, and other departments of the federal government that have supported investigations of the types of events covered by subparagraph A, this is basically UAP stuff, blah, 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 shall conduct comprehensive searches of all records relating to non-disclosure orders relating to the types of events described in subsection A, and provide copies of such orders, agreements, or obligations to the office being Arrow. So here they're saying that all of these government agencies have to tell Arrow about all of their secret their NDAs that they've got people held under for all of the different stuff relating to UAP. I read this and I said, this ain't going to happen. I highly doubt this. What do you think? I mean, I think this is a pretty tall order.
And that's what I'm starting to see a pattern of that here. I mean, the option here is listed, but what is the likelihood of it being enforced or taken advantage of, I should say? I just don't.
Here's the route. Here's the route. Shall conduct comprehensive searches. Oh, we did our search, but we didn't find any NDAs that we should tell you about, or non-disclosure orders, as they're called. So there's the out. I'm like, oh boy, this is a lot of nothing here. But anyhow, it's
Jeez.
unfortunate. I don't want to sound negative because there
I
is
know.
some good
Well,
stuff in here, but it's the truth. It's the
I
truth.
mean, it's there to, like I said, whistleblowers can blow the whistle if they choose to. So it's the ability for you to act if you're going to act in good faith. So it's there, which is the good thing. And it's just, you know, past being the past and history being history, we're kind of looking at it like, hey, maybe they'll continue doing business as usual, but hopefully this is being put in here for action to happen. I'm hoping we get that behind, but I guess we'll have to wait
We'll have to
540
wait and
days to
see.
figure it out. Exactly.
Mhm. And speaking of history, there's a big point on that coming up too. We'll talk about that in the next section. But this is the end of the first section, 1673, and there was just another couple lines I wanted to talk about, which was basically in this current NDAA, this is section 1673. Last year's NDAA, 2022, the meaty UAP section in last year's NDAA happened to be 1683, not 1673, which is this year's. And later on, we're going to see here very soon, they basically cut and paste this whole section from that year into this year. And they made some changes, and they talk about it here just in terms of the annual reports, but they just talk about how they changed aerial. All the words, everywhere there was the word aerial, they changed it with anomalous. So nothing here to exciting to talk about other than that. So that pretty much ends this section. I believe it's done after this. Yeah, there's nothing else at the end of this that was too meaningful. And then it goes on to the next section, which has nothing to do with UAPs. So we're going to jump now to the only other two sections that have to do with UAPs, and that's all the way on page 2,822 out of the 4,312. I can't imagine all these Congress people had to read this.
Yes, tucked in there on page 2080. Yeah, 2,822.
22. So there's two sections here, 6802 and 6803. 6803 is very short, really doesn't talk a lot about a lot. But 6802 is basically the cut and paste of the section we just talked about, which was the one from 2022. So this section says modification of requirement for office to address unidentified anomalous phenomenon. And then you can see here, it's basically just taking section 1683 from last year's NDAA and amending it to look like this. So that's what we've got here. So I didn't do a comparison of what was written last year versus this year. Someone else may end up doing that eventually, but there's a few obviously important things that are in here that I once again kind of take as the government giving the office and giving the DOD and the DNI a pass. So here we go. Establishment of the office, right? So the law is passed. Arrow's got to get formed. Hasn't even been formed yet, right? That's kind of news. I thought it had already been formed, but no, it was talked about in July, but nobody really did anything yet. And whatever has gone on has been leftovers from the UAP task force and whatever the DNI wanted to do. So here it says not later than 120 days after the enactment of the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, which is part of this section. It says the Secretary of Defense and the DNI shall establish the office with a component of the Office of the Secretary of Defense or within joint organization, blah, 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 to carry out the duties of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force. So, and it says effective this was the original UAP task force that was laid down last year, right? Or 2 years ago, or I should say last year, late last year,
Mm-hmm.
1 year. So for the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. So this was laid down then, and they had to make an office. So now they're saying not later than 120 days after the passage of this year's intelligence authorization. Now, that's 4 months.
Right.
So they did the UAP task force office. I don't know if it's still there or if it's gone. I don't know if anybody does, but this new office, obviously the all domain anomaly resolution office, I misquoted that earlier, is they've got 4 months to do it. So here we go again, kick the can down the road. What do you
Right.
think?
No, it's exactly. I mean, that's the part that I'm upset about is that it's to me, and like I say, not to seem negative about it, but what can you do when this happens? Is happening seems to be a pattern now every year. They're just like you said, kicking the can down the road. Do they really want disclosure for us, or do they want to keep us wrapped up in worrying about this report and when these things are going to happen? I think that really is taking our eye off the ball. But I mean, at least it's something. At least it's something.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we have to stay positive. Obviously, this has never happened before, right? We have to give credit to the government for even putting this verbiage in the defense bill, which is, prior to 2022 in that NDAA, there was no one ever talked about UAPs, right? So there's positives here. I guess we were all hoping for a little more intensity, but I think it's,
Well, I mean, and
I don't
then
see
you're
it.
coming off the back of a UAP report that still hasn't been given. So how can you lend any credence to any of this even happening if we can't even follow up on what we were told we were going to get last year? I mean, this.
You're
Okay.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Obviously, if the NDA 2022 NDAA said this had to happen and it didn't, the 2023 NDAA is saying this has to happen. Are we so sure it's going to, based on their track record? Doesn't look. It's not promising, right? They have a bad track record,
Pretty
and
frustrating. Pretty frustrating. I
yeah,
hope they make amends. I hope we get it. They have to make. You can't just shove this down our throat and not follow through with what you originally promised to do. And I just hope somebody out there understands that. And I hope they respect the time of the people and respect the people in general and give us what they said they were going to give us, please.
yeah. How much of that actually is going to filter down to us, we the people, is really in question. Because, like I said, I didn't see anything about public disclosures in here, but we'll keep going. The next section that I thought was interesting was just basically discussion of, this talks about the directors here, blah blah blah. Down here they talk about who the Aero office has to report to, and we already discussed this at the very beginning, but it has to report. The director of the office shall report directly to the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Principal Deputy of the Director of National Intelligence. So, not the head honcho, so to speak. This office reports to a couple deputies under, a level down from the top. So, what does that mean? Doesn't mean much of anything. All it means is, once again, the kids are minding the candy store, and are we going to get true transparency, and are they going to be forthright with what they learn, even with Congress, right? So obviously, if the Aero office is in trouble, their boss is the the Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and then the Deputy Director of National Intelligence. how far how far are they going to take any sort of disciplining, right? Congress could run to these two and say, hey, the office isn't producing what it's supposed to produce. What are these guys going to do? I mean, who knows? I feel like the office should have been out from underneath the Defense Department in
Right.
order for it to have carry some weight. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, the same. I agree. I remember when they first set it up. I mean, that was the view, is that how are you going to allow them to be the ones to be over this when it should be more outsourced, and something that would hold more, something that would be a little more credible than the setup that they currently have. Because like you say, if they're the ones over the whole thing, are they really going to enact any action and discipline when things aren't? Well, obviously the answer is no, because we don't have a report right now. I
No.
mean, obviously the answer is no.
Right. And so, who we got? Lloyd Austin was is the Secretary of Defense. Avril Haines is the um, Director of National Intelligence. They're not motivated to make this happen. This is a thorn in their side. So my gut tells me it's not. Who knows what's going to end up happening here? But yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, let's keep rolling here. So the next section, we're almost through. Some of this stuff is just kind of overview that I'm not going to pour into, but 2824 and 2825 talks about the duties of what this office has to do, and there's a lot of good detail in here. Reporting, collection, including adverse psychological effects and regarding unidentified UAPs, developing processes and procedures to deal with the incidents, blah, blah, blah. And then later on down here, they talk about field investigations, which I thought was interesting. I think it's on, page was that on? 20 here, it's on here. Response to and field investigations of UAP. So the Secretary of Defense and the DNI are going to jointly designate from within their respective organizations an official to be under the direction of the office, responsible for ensuring appropriate expertise, authorities, data, et cetera, for rapid response to and support for the conduct of field investigations of incidents involving UAPs. So they're basically going to become MUFON investigators, right? So they're going to have to get somebody to go investigate this stuff. So, that's good. Obviously, that's probably already happening.
Thank you. It's been happening for 75 years. They're already doing this
They're
stuff.
already looking at this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this means much, but yeah, it just kind of puts it in writing. Yeah, because of course they're going and get the data, and they're getting the crash retrievals, and they're getting the bodies, and they're getting whatever else there is there that we haven't heard about. But there's something coming for that.
I hope so. I hope so, Michelle.
Hold on. So anyhow, blasting through this. Oops, sorry. So we've got procedures. Yep, we're done there. Let's go to this section. Oh, the next pass on 2830. This is just more details, but on 2830, down here, where are we? Lines 13 through 18. Is that true? Or was I off by a page? May have been off by a page. There is a line that talks about, oh yeah, here it is. This is where we get into the fun stuff. I told you it was coming. Historical record report. How about that? So, what is
elaborate?
That?
Yeah,
yes.
let's
what
elaborate.
Is this? Not later than 540 days. Good grief! A year and a half after this thing gets passed, the office shall submit to Congress, to the committees, not the public, right? The Intelligence and Defense Committee and leadership, a written report of detailing the historical record of the U.S. government relating to unidentified aerial phenomena. And the
Okay.
records have to include all of this stuff. And I think, where is the date? Going focus on the beginning period on January 1st, 1945.
Okay.
Yay!
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they have to tell us about Roswell.
I'm happy about that. I mean,
Yes.
that is the best part. In a year and a half is fair. It's fair to dig that up.
Well,
We'll give that.
they've got 75 years of digging.
Well, here's the thing: they don't have to
Or
dig because they.
77 if you go back to 1945,
But the
right?
information is readily available. It's right there. They don't have to dig anywhere. I mean, that's the thing. So they have a year and a half to get disclosure set up so they can tell us they did retrieve a crash, a retrieve craft, and they did retrieve alien bodies. So that's what I hope I get 500 for. I'm gonna put on my calendar. I'm counting down 540 days.
Right.
Yeah.
So that'll be June of 2024. We might get something. Ugh. But yeah. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. And there's another goodie in here. It basically details the history. Obviously, the date's important. Compilation of this, activities here, successful, unsuccessful, of tracking, blah, blah, blah. But here's the good one. On page 2832, which I was there, on lines 13 through 18, they must, in this historical report, reveal any efforts to obfuscate, manipulate public opinion, hide, or otherwise provide incorrect, unclassified, or classified information about UAP or related activities. So tell me if you think the government's going to come clean on
No,
the
how do
fact
you
that they were
enforce it?
covering up. So this is
No,
the history report must cover the cover up. What's going to happen here? I'm laughing because we all know the answer to this.
exactly. It's pretty ridiculous, but they can say they put it in there. So
Right.
at least the thought was there. So I appreciate that.
Yes, indeed. I mean, here's the thing. And you and I have discussed this before. This will become readily apparent the minute that disclosure to any degree takes place and we find out that the government has had crash retrieval materials or bodies or more detail about encounters that we know about but they won't verify. So this is huge. I mean, and this is going to come to pass. Clearly, the minute we know all that stuff is the same minute that we know that they've been obfuscating, manipulating public opinion, hiding, providing incorrect information. So I have a feeling they're not going to come out and do that unless the house of cards comes down. And if the house of cards comes down, then we have the answer. And anyhow, I
Yeah,
thought this was great.
it was definitely a good look into what the good intentions of whoever wrote this up, but
Yes.
in the end, can you trust? Can you really trust a liar? Can a liar be trusted?
Yeah.
If I just use the example because it's pretty blunt, but if you catch a liar in a lie, you have enough evidence to show that they're not telling the truth. But if they continue to lie, how can you ever prove? You know what I'm trying to say
I
there?
know exactly what you're saying. We both know people who behave this way, and there's a lot of people around in our lives and in public service who will deny till their grave. And if they never admit that they lied, then they really never lied, right? They if they never admit to it, even though you might be able to prove it, if they deny it and they don't accept it, unless you see the irrefutable evidence, which most of the world won't, right? They never lied. It's really, really unfair, but this is how the world works, right? If you
Yeah,
can't prove it, if there's some information that some people have that they're lying, but not everybody sees it, they can just keep denying.
and we have obviously legislative process that works. It does work when it wants to. I would say obviously this is a great step
Hmm.
in getting something going that way, but I would say don't put all your eggs in that basket, because believe it or not, we really don't need them to even tell us anything. We already know. We all have the evidence that we need. So
Yes.
individually, we have enough of the pieces to come together and already show that these things are real and these things are happening. So that's why I feel like, and that's why I say that this is almost like a distraction. And like you said, kicking the can down the road, keeping us focused on that over there, when we already have. I mean, the government, I know the people on the inside that know the things that we want them to tell us, they look at us and they say, yep, that was a real sighting there. Yep, that was an ET walk. They have the information, and they're looking at us like, you guys already have the information. But you're asking us to tell you, but you guys have it already. And I think that's the thing that we need to like zone in on
Hmm.
and realize that we already have what we're asking them to give us. We already have. The only thing we don't have is recovered craft, obviously, but everything else,
Right. Or
I think
confirmation
we,
of that. Right.
I think we have pretty much everything else that we're asking for.
Right. And we're just looking for confirmation. And you're right. They're not going to say anything if they don't have to. Clearly, why would they? It doesn't help their cause, because then now they're all in trouble. Because then that
Right.
means they were hiding and
So that
obfuscating.
that one that day will never come, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It just, realistically, let's just be realistic. I mean, that's a whole nother video though, because we can
Hmm.
go deep down that hole, and I think we might go deep down that hole at some point. But I'm glad that we were at least able to get this information out, cover the positives of what was in here, but then being realistic on and really only based on past experience, what may end up happening with this 2023 NDAA. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I think we got a couple more things to go through here, but no, this is moving in the right direction. Absolutely, positively, right? We know
Hmm.
that for sure. So let's go through the rest of this, because there's only like 3 or 4 points left, and then we'll wrap it up. How's that sound?
Yep, yep.
Let's do it, and I'll give you kind of my overview. All right, the historical stuff is done here. The next item that I wanted to note was another date, another pass. So the reports from, I guess, these annual reports, not later than 180 days after the enactment of this, and annually thereafter for 4 years, the DNI and the Secretary of Defense shall jointly submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report. So here we go. So this is the thing we were supposed to get October 31st. So now, once this law is passed, they have 4 months to, or excuse me, 6 months, 180 days, 6 months to produce the next report. So it's similar to what happened last year, right? Where we had that report in June, right on the day I think it was due. Because I think the NDAA 2022 passed on December 25th or 24th or something. I don't remember. And then they came out with the report June 24th. So
Hmm.
here's the same deal, where the same office that is, the DNI and the DOD have to produce a report. once a year, not twice a year, once a year. And, you know, I guess because the Arrow office is underneath these two organizations, I guess that's why they're giving the responsibility of the reporting to
Hmm.
the high level group. Anyhow, nothing new there. And then I think this next one is kind of interesting. Jumping all the way to page 2837, there's another interesting date, which makes me wonder about this year's UAP report. And I want to get your opinion on this. But right here, they talk about, or is this line 7 and 8? Not later than December 31st, 2022, and not less frequently than semi-annually thereafter through to 2026, so every 6 months, the director of the office shall provide to the appropriate congressional committees classified briefings on UAP. So, what is this saying? This is saying that before the end of this year, the Arrow office, which doesn't exist yet, has to provide a classified briefing to Congress. This doesn't make sense to me. I'm
No.
not sure I understand. I think what it is there's verbiage from the last year's NDAA that they didn't correct. Because how can you have a briefing from the director of the office if the office doesn't exist yet? Now, I do recall there was, I think, a director assigned, so I don't want to misspeak there. But, in one section, they got 120 days to form the office, and in another section, they're saying, well, in what is it? Today's the 12th or the 13th. So today's the 13th. So they've got
18
18
days.
days
Yeah.
to produce
And
a classified report.
aren't they going on winter on their break here coming up
Yeah,
a day or two? So
I think
15th,
they're
right?
15th or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of strange. I don't know what this means, if it really amounts to anything. When I read it, it made me think, okay, if they do this, then the report we were expecting October 31st is kind of going to be forgotten about. I mean, if they do a classified briefing, maybe there's a classified report behind it. Who knows? But I don't know.
Well, see
We've heard
the
mixed bag of where, Avril Haines has supposedly had the report on her desk last week, and no one's heard anything since.
we don't care about the classified stuff. We want the public report. You
Of
know what I mean?
course.
So it's like they still owe us that. So just because of this, they can't not give us what we were by law
Right.
allowed to get. So I don't get this. It makes me almost feel like December 31st, 2023, not later than being the first year that this is in effect. That would make more sense than
Yeah.
what I'm reading here. So
Maybe it's a typo. But you're
yeah.
right. But here's what my thinking was. If you pass the NDAA 2023, does that null and void the NDAA 2022? It shouldn't, right? Because the year hasn't ended yet. This goes into effect January 1st. But I'm wondering, I don't know. Who knows what tricks they're playing?
That's a good thought though, because what happens to that? We're in a limbo. We're just in a weird spot right now. I mean, I would like to take this to the bank, but unfortunately, in the position that we're in right now, we just can't do that.
Mm-hmm. And here's a detail on this first briefing, if it's going to happen before the end of the year. It says the first briefing provided under paragraph 1 shall include all incidents involving UAP phenomena that were reported in the task force by the UAP task force on June 24th, 2021. So the famed 143 out of 144 cases that were unexplained have to be included in this briefing. So this is once again Congress trying to make sure that they don't brush off any history that is unclosed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we learned in the May congressional hearing that there were some, 400 reports. And then before the October 31st report came out, there was some number in the 300s where they said half were explained. So there's all these numbers that they're throwing around about all these reports. So what's covered and what's not. I kind of like this because at least this was a stake in the ground. It's like you guys said 143 weren't explained. So you've had another year and a half. What have you found out? Right? Probably not a whole lot. And let's just jump here so we can wrap this up. Probably the most important thing that was talked about very early on, but was spelled out very clearly right at the end here. This talks about organizations, is the term unidentified aerial phenomenon. So here we go. We have the definition, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, excuse me, changed from aerial to anonymous. So item A, airborne objects. Clearly, that's the aerial part, right? So you got aerial objects that are not immediately identifiable, transmedium objects, which they define transmedium on the previous page. Transmedium means it can go from outer space to the atmosphere to water. And then they even called out submerged objects or devices that are not identifiable that display behavior suggesting devices may be related to the objects described in subparagraph A. So anyhow, now anomalous covers the whole gambit, right? Before they probably could have said, oh, well, that UFO went into the water. That's not part of our responsibility. So now it's clear. So I take this as good news. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good definition. Pretty much covers the gamut of what we know about these things.
Yep.
So I mean, I'm glad that they put that in there.
Yep. And last but not least, which isn't really anything too earth-shattering here, was this section 6803, which talks about really it's kind of an oversight committee. The Comptroller General, not to be confused with the Inspector General, which has been in recent press. The Comptroller General is a congressional watchdog organization that actually does work for the Congress, so it's kind of strange. But they basically, this section details how the Comptroller General has to produce a list of personnel that can go into the office within 90 days. And in addition, it also lists the fact that they have to give verbal briefings not later than 120 days after the enactment of this. So the Comptroller General is kind of like the enforcer for the Congress, who can go around and say, okay, you owe Congress this, what you got. I have to report to Congress, so you better come clean here and tell me what you owe them. And then, of course, if they don't, then obviously the Comptroller General is just going to report what they know. Right. So that's all that this is. There's nothing really earth-shattering here. So that's it, man. What are your? We covered it in pretty quick, but at least we got it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be as positive and hopeful as possible, but I'm just not being. I mean, this is great. Let me just say, this is great. What I'm seeing here. I hope if it plays out the way that it's being outlined, this would be a great, wonderful thing. I want to give them the benefit to execute this and prove me wrong, prove us all wrong. So hopefully they bring us exactly what it is they've laid out in this 2023 NDAA.
Yes. I mean, we know the details now. It's going to get signed by the president. There's definitely no reason why it wouldn't. So it's going to become law. So we'll go down the same path we did this year. And as the deadlines approach, we'll all have our fingers crossed that something interesting will come out, and hopefully they follow suit, and we go from there. I mean, the key difference this year than last year is, of course, the whistleblower protection stuff. That, of course, is now enables people to come forward. Now, we've got some pretty serious congressional people who aren't too happy about all the obfuscation and the cover up. My gut tells me that, let's say all of this transpires behind closed doors, where all these reports and disclosure and whistleblowers come and tell their story. I think it'll very, very quickly become very compelling, right? That we're not alone and that the government has been covering it up. My gut tells me that some of these congressional leaders, like the Marco Rubios and the Tim Burchetts and all those guys, will be bursting at the seams. They're not going to be able to disclose stuff if it's if it's classified, but they're going to push real hard to create an unclassified report that the public needs to know about.
Right.
That's my hope, that the representatives are just pushed to the edge where they're like, hey, why don't the American people know about this? Why can't they know about this? Yeah, we don't have to tell them about the means and the methods and the means of how you collected this data so that we don't endanger ourselves to our adversaries with our tech. But you can at least tell them what happened or what is real and what's not real. So This is my hope, that how it pans out.
No, my hope also. I mean, actually, it's funny you bring up those two, because I actually sent out a tweet the other day with some information that I thought Congress should take a look at, and I put it at Tim Burchett and at Marco Rubio and Gillibrand. So those are
Gallagher and all those folks.
The ones that I see is our allies within the Congress that want this just as much as we do. So it's great that we have them there, but it's going to be, so with the enforcer, they said comptroller general. So I guess with them there, maybe they can be the muscle to kind of make things happen. Like if we have them in this case, maybe we would have that report delivered. So, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We will see. Anyhow.
All right. Well, this has been great. That I appreciate you going over this with the viewers today. We've given our opinions on it. Yes. I would like to see what our viewers think about this. Why don't you go ahead and leave your opinion on what you interpreted from this 2023 NDAA in the comments, and we'll go ahead and we'll address that on the next video.
Absolutely. I'll send you a link too, and in the video you can put a link to the big PDF document, and people can read it for themselves if they want. It's public domain.
Definitely. And what I'll probably do, I'll post something in the community tab, and then we can all get together there and kind of continue the discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, awesome, this is crazy. I mean, we this is the first time Social Dig has done breaking news. So appreciate you coming by. Not too much fancy in and outs going on here. We're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna publish this, and we're doing it for the people today.
Let it roll. Yes, indeed.
All right.
We need to know. Everyone needs to know.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming in today, Mattel.
All right.
This has been the Social Dig. You guys all take care out there.